Guys, welcome back. It is RacerX, and today I've got a pretty cool little video planned. I actually have two really cool cars that I want to show you. I'm back here with my buddies at the Hurst Autoplex in Hurst, Texas, and two very different cars. I'm really looking forward to this little review. Behind me I've got the Chevy Corvette Z06 and also Godzilla itself. It is the Nissan GTR. This comparison should be a lot of fun for those of you out there that are looking to get into a sports car, something that is massively powerful, but also just very comfortable to drive around. These two cars would be in the running, and it should be fun to compare them. Also, if you are new to the channel, make sure you hit the subscribe button down there on the bottom, and here we go. We got the 1,000 horsepower helmet. So if you are truly a sports car fanatic or even an enthusiast, you obviously have a lot of knowledge, you should, about Corvette's flagship car. It's that Z06. Of course, they do have the ZR1. You don't see very many of them. But that Z06 was kind of their bad daddy for a long time and will continue to be one of their flagship cars well into the future. The GTR is Nissan's kind of staple, high dollar car, their supercar that they came out with quite some time ago. But I tell you what, you want to talk about making a name. Godzilla, the GTR, that thing has been in numerous movies. It has been all over. If you ever go to Texas 2K, you will see, it almost looks like GTR Fest. They are so modifiable. You see so many incredibly fast GTRs, and they're so easy to modify. And like I said, guys, the Z06, same thing. It's a really fun test to kind of put these two cars up against each other. So the very first thing I want to point out is the two cars. There's very different cars. But if you look at that Z06, and I realize I'm a Corvette guy, guys. I really enjoy Corvettes. But you want to talk about having a road presence. Just look at that Z06 behind me. And that thing looks mean as hell. As far as I'm concerned, it's one of the meaner looking cars on the road. Has an incredible road presence. I want to kind of take just a second and walk around it just a little bit so you can see the side of the car, the side profile. Of course, you've got the very noticeable Z06 badge on the side here. You've got the brake inlets here, which are go all the way back to the C5 car, which they had. And it's just a really mean looking car, guys. I love this car, and I actually really like the interior of this car, which I'll show you here shortly. But also behind me, we've got the GTR, an entirely different looking car. This car actually is 4 seats versus 2 in the Corvette. And it doesn't even look close to the same. You can see it still looks really sharp if you know what a GTR looks like. But a GTR to me, it doesn't have quite the same road presence as the Corvette. And for some people, that's a good thing. They might like a little bit more of a sleeper type. For car enthusiasts, you always know what a GTR looks like. Those big round tail lights, you can see them in the dark. But here's the side profile of the GTR, guys. Once again, you can see right here, right in front of the door, you've got kind of a signature GTR feature, which is kind of similar to the Corvette actually over there. But the similarities, they almost kind of end there. And I want to go through all those. Here we have the interior of the Z06 Corvette, guys. I am a huge fan of these red interiors like that. It's just my personal preference. But I want to kind of show you sort of what it looks like inside one of these monsters. You can see that the dash really does kind of wrap around. If you're a Mopar guy, it has a little bit of a flare like a Challenger would, but a little more space age. You can see here, this is an 8-speed automatic car. It's got the flat bottom steering wheel on it with leather. Just a really sharp looking car. It does have the heads-up display, which is all the way up there. And the center console is relatively simple, very useful. And of course, guys, there is no back seat in this car. So definitely a really nice place to sit. And believe it or not, there's actually a little more room in this car than you would think. Even though it is a 2-door sports car, actually you kind of fit in it quite nicely. And here we have the interior on the Nissan GTR. As you can see, normal kind of a round steering wheel. Very different place to sit. It's also very comfortable. It's got more than enough room in it if you're a decent sized guy. You may be able to see this here, guys. The center console is shaped entirely different in this car. As you can see, a lot of little bells and whistles here. This car has a lot of very cool electronics on it. You've got a lot of different gauges up here. But in terms of just the dash shape, the seat shape. Of course, and there are little bitty seats back here, guys. I don't think you could put a human being in there. They are unbelievably small, but the center console, really everything about this car is very, very different from the outside and on the inside, but they're both really, really neat in their own right. I also want to talk about the rear of both cars. They're very, very different looking from the back. As you can see, the Corvette has these very angular taillights on it. Very pronounced Corvette badge here. The exhausts are actually quite large. I don't know if you can kind of make those out, but it's got the quad tip exhaust really right through the center, fairly large. And then the spoiler is, it's got quite an angle on it. I want to kind of show you that. You can see the angle on that spoiler is pretty pronounced, but it does sit fairly close to the deck here. And let's go over and take a quick look at the GTR. Very different by comparison. It is still a quad-tipped exhaust, and these exhausts, they're huge. You can see right there, they're really, really big. Giant circular taillights on the GTR. It makes things very noticeable if you know what you're looking for, if you know GTRs. And then back here, of course, you've got your GTR badge. And the spoiler actually sits up off the deck a little bit, actually quite a bit, about 4 or 5 inches, and it has a completely different look to it. I want to show you the side of it here. You can see there. And then there's another look at the spoiler. So really both cars look fantastic from the back, but very, very different. Let's talk a little bit about the wheels on these two cars. So you've got a 20-inch wheel here with a Toyo Proxys Sport tire. On the front of the GTR, you've got a 255 width tire. On the back, it actually comes with a 285 width tire, a little bit of a difference. But here's the big thing, guys. The GTR, as most of you may know, is all-wheel drive, which makes this car really, really fun to drive, especially from a dig. As people know, the GTRs eat people up, and really it's because of the very advanced all-wheel drive system that these cars have. And of course, the tires are pretty stout as well on this thing. On the Corvette, it is a completely different story. You've got different size wheels in both the front and the back, and of course the width is different. You get a Michelin Pilot Super Sport, and in the front you get a 285. In the back, you actually get, in the fronts are actually 19s, the backs are 20s, 335 in width on the back of this car with 285s in the front. So now both of these cars actually have very stout brake packages on them. On the Corvette, you can see, I mean, they're steel brakes, but they're huge 6-piston Brembos, and it's got a slotted rotor. And on the GTR, which I'll shoot over here, and I'll show you guys, the GTR's actually got large 6-piston Brembos as well. And it also has the steel brakes, and those are actually drilled, but really, really stout amount of braking power on both cars. Next, I want to jump in to what this comparison is really all about. It's the good stuff. It is the motors in these two cars that make them so special. First, I want to talk about the Nissan GTR. It's actually a V6, guys. It's a 3.8 liter V6, but it is twin turbocharged, and as you can see, right here, you've got the snails. They kind of sit up underneath these intakes here. They're really hard to see, but this thing is like a work of art. This is a beautiful motor in this thing, guys. Over here, you've got the other twin turbo, the other part of the twin turbo, but it's like 545 horsepower, guys. And also, it makes like 463 pound-feet of torque. But I tell you what, this thing has a really, really incredible launch control system, and that's what makes the GTR so neat, is the way that it comes off the line with that all-wheel drive. It spools up those turbos and just blasts the hell off, and it makes this car just an absolute fun toy to drive. Now, the Z06, by comparison, completely different deal. So you've got the LT4 motor in the Z06, beautiful motor again, completely different. You've got a V8 in this. That's a supercharger sitting right on top. It's a relatively smaller supercharger. I believe it is the 1.7 liter supercharger, same one in the ZL1 that I drove a little while back. But it is a very efficient supercharger. And you can see it also has the functional cooling in it. And guys, it's that 6.2 liter motor that we've all come to know and love. Completely different story, but a very, very clean motor in here, guys. I want to show you the motors one last time. And there is that beautiful LT4 Corvette motor. You can see just how clean the inside of this thing is. You're talking about 650 pound-feet of torque and 650 horsepower in this monster. And that blower is very, very efficient. You can see the duct there for air intake. Really, really sharp. And then, of course, here's another look at that GTR motor, guys. I don't want to let my shadow get in the way, but man, what a pretty motor in this car. Both of these two cars, fantastic looking power plant. One other quick item that I would like to note is obviously the weight of the two cars. As we know, being performance folks, weight makes a big difference. So while this is not the lightest Corvette out there, it is lighter than the GTR. So this Corvette Z06 coupe comes in right around 3,525 pounds. The GTR is like 3,825. So you're talking about a 300-pound difference, which can be significant. And also we know that the GTR is working with about a 100 horsepower deficit. But as we mentioned, it's all-wheel drive versus two-wheel drive. It should be fun to drive these two cars to see how they perform. First up, I am in the Z06, and this is a very familiar place for me to sit, guys, just from a comfort level. I really like the inside of this car. I just love the way the dash wraps around in the seating position, the flat bottom steering wheel. Everything in this car feels so comfortable to me. I actually have a little bit of room here, which is amazing because the car really isn't all that big, but I mean, it feels roomy enough, but it still has that cockpit type feel that I really have come to love and enjoy in a lot of my other Corvettes. But you know what? Let's go ahead and start running around in this so we can see how it performs. So now that I'm aboard the Z06 and I'm able to drive it, I can feel just how special that magnetic ride suspension is. I really like it. This particular one does come with the magnetic ride suspension, which means that every second there are thousands of little calculations going on within the suspension of this vehicle that allow it to have a smooth ride and keep it planted on the ground. And I tell you what, you can kind of feel it when you drive the car. It does feel nice and planted when you go to drive it. It doesn't feel out of control, and the power comes on really nice and smooth in this car. I actually really like the way that the accelerator feels. Kind of when you're starting to get into it, you can really kind of feel what the blower's trying to do, and it doesn't slam. I know in my Hellcat, the power comes on and it just slams really hard, and of course we know it's 1,000 horsepower, but this thing, the power feels really nice and smooth. It's very controllable. From a handling perspective, this car really has some good feel to it. You know, obviously I'm used to a bigger car than this, but having had Corvettes in the past, it doesn't disappoint from a handling perspective. I can really move this car around the road nicely. Just from kind of an initial little jump, the car feels really responsive, just kind of tipping into it a little bit. You can hopefully hear that exhaust. It sounds really nice. And you know what? This car is an absolute joy to drive. And boy, does it look mean. From the outside, boy, I think I showed you guys before, but the car looks so mean. And what a road presence. I'm driving it around and everybody's like, just can't take their eyes off the damn car. It is a very neat machine to drive. So here we are coming from a stop sign. We're gonna go ahead and give it a little bit of juice here. And it sounds fantastic. And you know what? The car does not disappoint. The power's all there. It is just a really well sorted package on this car. And you know what? I mean, it's comfortable to drive. I love the cockpit type feel. I really can't say enough about the Z06, guys. I knew I wouldn't be disappointed driving the car. It's just a really neat car. There's a reason that Chevy markets these as one of the best cars out there that they've made. And I fully agree. I think the car looks good. It drives good. I mean, it sounds good. I mean, I'm a big fan, guys. If you haven't had a chance to drive one of these Z06s, go drive one. And boy, I mean, the tip-in is so nice on this car, and reminds me a little bit of the Camaro ZL1 that I drove a little while back. Obviously, it's the same power plant, maybe slightly more responsive because this is a lighter car, but you know, similar type feel. It's very easy to drive this car. It really is, and the visibility for a Corvette is actually really good. I can see quite well out of the car, so not disappointed at all with the Z06 Corvette. Really enjoy it. So now I am in the GTR. Completely different experience altogether. Completely different sound when you start it. It's a little quieter, has a little bit different feel. You can definitely tell that there's some stuff going on under the hood, but you know what? It's kind of a more open feel to this car. The paddle shifters are a little bigger. It's got the round steering wheels we talked about. The center console is very much centered. You've got a lot of different buttons, and of course you've got your infotainment center up here right below the camera. You can't quite see, but a lot of different settings on here as well. And you've got these three little levers down here that you can actually play with things like suspension, your drive mode, stuff like that. I'm going to kind of leave those be for the most part. But I just kind of want to run this thing through its paces and see what the normal driving experience is like in the GTR, and we'll compare it to the Vet. Okay, so the first thing I noticed is the difference, obviously, in the sound between the two cars. Obviously, you're going to get that blower whine from the Corvette Z06. This one has that very distinct turbo sound, and you can hear those turbos underneath the hood of this car really spooling up as you kind of go to accelerate. And I'm actually surprised at how readily the GTR accelerates in terms of I don't really feel any lag. I guess it's just the way this car is made. Now this car does feature a dual clutch transmission DCT that is pretty advanced, and of course coupled with the all-wheel drive system, that's what makes this car really, really special. No, it's not that it sets the world on fire with 545 horsepower, because there are other cars that will put that out readily or more, but it's the way that the car makes the power. And I talk about this all the time, is how effective does the car put the power to the ground, and what is it really like to drive the thing? Because if you go drive you could go drive a $250,000 Porsche GT3, and the driving experience is phenomenal, even though the car makes just under 500 horsepower. So it all depends on what's going on with the car, how it puts the power down, the way the car corners. A lot of different things go into the driving experience on one of these cars. And I'm a little surprised that this car actually comes out of the corner quite nicely. We'll put the car through its paces a little bit more here in a second, and we'll kind of get some final thoughts on just how this thing stacks up performance-wise. All right, so rounding a corner in the GTR. No nonsense. Wow. There's no nonsense when you go to take off in this car. And granted, I'm not flooring the car, but I'm definitely giving it some acceleration. I'm in a safe place. But I will say that, man, it really does astound you just how easily this car grabs and goes. I am very used to a rear-wheel drive sports car, so you've always got to manage the spin or modulate the throttle so that doesn't happen. In this car, you just kind of go. I didn't feel any fanfare in that whatsoever. You go to let loose on this thing, and it just goes. It really does. It just goes, and it's pretty impressive. I don't know if the top end pull is quite maybe as hard as the Z06, but it's pretty close. I'm actually surprised at the GTR in terms of how it feels when you're accelerating. It is pretty damn quick, and that whole like 0 to 80 range, this thing is a monster. Boy, I mean, it just grabs, and it really does grab and go. If you've never driven a GTR, that is just a really neat feature of this car. And I didn't even do the launch control and all that kind of jazz. I literally just kind of came out, and I can feel the all-wheel drive system working, and it is fantastic. So, I mean, really, these two cars, they're just so different. It's so hard to compare these two cars because they are so different. But this car really drives quite nicely. I'm coming out of a curve. Wow. This thing is a lot of fun to drive. I see why people like driving the GTR. Just because it's like you just want to get out of a corner or something like that, and the thing just grabs and goes like hell. It really does. This thing is a beast. Wow. This thing just inspires so much confidence coming out of a corner. I mean, it really does just grab and go, and I mean, you can almost just walk the thing, and it just, it just does its thing. It is a really neat car to drive. It's actually a lot of fun. Okay, so I now have the Nissan GTR back in its rightful place. You're getting the plates off of it right now. But, I'm back here at the Hearst Autoplex. Guys, if you're interested in either one of these two cars, please give these guys a call. They are fantastic to deal with. They've got some unbelievable cars here. Very, very cool stuff. And they will do a great job of taking care of you. I want to kind of give my final thoughts on the two cars. They're very, very different, guys. They drive different, they sound different, they just completely react different, and both cars are an absolute ton of fun. I would love to own either one of these two cars. From a looks perspective, I gotta give my edge to the Z06 in terms of coming out of a corner and inspiring confidence. The GTR all day. But in terms of like top end pull, I'm probably gonna go ahead and give it back to the Z06. Now, both cars, when they're modified, are monsters for different reasons. You're talking a turbo car versus a supercharger. supercharged car, and they just react and behave entirely different. But both cars in their own right are a ton of fun. Both of these cars, when they're well equipped, especially the GTR might be even a little more expensive, but they both can reach over 6 figures. And you know what? They're both a ton of fun to drive. So if you get a chance to go drive one of these, go do it. And if you get a chance to own one, you will absolutely love it. Both cars are really, really neat. I don't know which car to give the edge to because they are so different. And the price point on these two cars really isn't that far off because they're both used cars. But you know what? If you have that $60,000, $70,000 range in mind and you're looking at maybe getting a used supercar, and these things really are supercars, give the Z06 a look. Give the Nissan GTR a look, drive the two, decide which one is best for your driving habits, because they are both an absolute ton of fun to drive, and I'm pretty confident you'll like either one. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video and the review. If you have any questions, make sure you drop those down below. Until next time, RacerX.